Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Business Growth on Purpose. Our guest today is Ken Cheo of oursalescoach.com, and Ken is a sales coach master, and he's actually a fellow manufacturing master with me, part of that program. So Ken is going to help us see some ways that sales has changed in light of the pandemic, in some ways it stayed the same, and some key principles. If you're running a manufacturing or industrial business, you'll want to listen closely if you have to ever depend on either a sales staff or outsource sales. How to get more out of them is exactly what we're going to be exploring with Ken starting right now. Well, welcome, Ken, to Business Growth on Purpose.
Oh, great to be here, Jose. Great.
Well, Ken, for our audience sake, just if you could just describe what you do and who you do it for.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, my company's called Our Sales Coach, and we work with sales teams, sales managers, business owners if they're managing the sales team, and we make sure that they are getting the meetings they need with the right decision makers, and we help them to make sure they have a execution on a sales process that enables them to close the right amount of business for them and continue to grow. That's basically what we do.
Right. So are these mostly mid-market type companies by and large?
Yeah. Small to medium-sized businesses. Yeah.
Okay.
We would typically work with maybe 3 to 6 to maybe a dozen salespeople with their managers. We usually work with them over a period of 6 months, and we're with them for, say, a couple hours each session. And it's a combination of coaching and training.
Gotcha. So you're kind of training through coaching in some ways.
Yeah,
I would imagine, right?
Exactly. Yes, and that's what we found. There's a couple of things here. You know, a lot of times when a company wants to get help with sales for the sales team, a company might come in and say, "Look, we'll customize a program just for you, and you can pick what modules you want. We'll come in for a day or 2 days, and then we'll have refreshers," right? But we as humans, it doesn't really matter how intelligent your people are. We cannot absorb 8 hours of information and know what to do with it. So what we do is we start off each session with coaching. So we're working on what are you working on? How are you applying what you've learned? But a lot of times what they need help with are things that we're going to be training them on maybe a month from now. Mm-hmm. And so they're seeing things repetitively, but in the context of their sales environment. And with the coaching, the application happens. They're applying it, on a regular basis properly. And so it's really the combination of the repetition and dripping it, not giving them the fire hose, and having the coaching alongside with that, along with the accountability.
Well, what's interesting about that is you started off with talking about a sales process. So in that size business, at least it's been my experience now, I'm working mostly owner-led businesses for like the last 17 years as Value Prop, is when you start off, they can't really tell you their process. Their process is, well, we try to get meetings and we meet their needs, or some other very generic kind of statement. Is that been similar to your experience when you start off?
Oh, totally. There's no question. And that's why I love what you do, Jose, because I find particularly manufacturers, okay, they've been in business for years. It's a family business, and they have business, and that's good and it's bad. It's bad because they're reactive. They're just reacting to what happens, especially if they're niched. People will find them, but then they're just responding to what comes in, and that's not really strategic. Especially if, let's say, they're a contract manufacturer. Mm-hmm. A lot of them have caught a lot of different types of business in a lot of different industries. And, as a result, they don't really have any real market penetration in any one area, or they don't know where their best opportunity is for growth. That's where you come in. So if somebody has really helped them thought through that, then it's just a matter of, are their salespeople really getting meetings with the right decision makers, first of all? And then when they do that, do they have a sales process that enables them to close the right amount of business? Because if they're fortunate enough to have people finding them either through the trade shows they go through or their website, they're just responding, but maybe they're having, 10, 15, 20% close rates. So they're really wasting a lot of time on 80 to 90% of the things they touch. That time they could be spending in front of better opportunities, closing better deals, you know? And that's the other thing that happens. And you'll probably find this also, Jose, that they're getting a lot of business, but it's not, maybe they're too small, the deals, or they're not as profitable as they could be. And so we make sure that they've got a process that enables them to really get the right decision makers on the phone, complementing the kinds of things that you do, executing on the strategy you help them develop, so that they're getting decision makers on the phone and they're running through a sales process so that their close rates, they work towards increasing that close rate and bringing in the right amount of business in a controlled way so that they can follow through and support it,
Well,
but continue to grow.
So Ken, you're very much singing from some of my favorite song sheets. I mean, these are important themes. What I've seen in the last 6 to 9 months coming out of the pandemic, talking to manufacturers, and very proudly, we're growing 30% year over year. We're booming. We've never been busier. And I never want to be that guy who spoils the party fun or the party favor, right? But I want to ask, I said, but is it good business? And is it, where are your margins? And it turns out, well, no, we're scrambling, paying overtime because we can't find enough people to work. So our cost of sales is going right up. And in fact, they're doing this double trajectory. Top line is growing, but sales is going, cost is going up faster. And the real question I always want to ask is, all right, is this growth because of something you did on purpose, or are you just riding the tide? Because if it's not on purpose, it's not sustainable. And you're hitting on that with the discussion on process and so on. But Ken, I'm dying to ask you this question related to all of this, because when you work with a team, and maybe you work with different teams than I've had occasion to work with at times, but I find that often, especially in manufacturing, people who end up in sales positions are there because they were the engineer who was good with customers, but doesn't really know selling as a science and art. They don't even know that it is, and that's something you can learn and get good at. So how often do you run into where you think the team, no matter what you do, they're kind of lacking some key like building blocks?
Yeah, well, it really depends, Jose. If you have an engineer who really understands the product, that is intuitive, okay, and has the skills to build strong, lasting relationships, that can be really powerful. So, for example, I have a client that does medical device manufacturing, and for them to really get a name brand pharmaceutical to fire the company who designed a piece of equipment just for them, tell them to crate their equipment up and get it off the property and go to somebody else. You don't just do that to anybody. You have to have somebody who's got credibility, that can build that relationship, and it doesn't happen overnight. So, what you described to me is the right person, but if they have to go out and prospect a lot, an engineer may not be your right person, okay, because they're not going to have the ability perhaps to go into a room full of strangers and have a great time, or have the wherewithal to make a lot of phone calls, deal with the rejection. So it really depends on the work environment you're putting them in, whether or not you have the right person. I was an engineer, okay, so I don't always admit it, but sales suits my personality. And so, you can't say that an engineer will never be a successful salesperson, but you have to really understand, all right, what is it exactly I'm going to want this person to do, and with whom? And then look at these softer skills are the things that are the fatal flaws. And you really need to drill down on that when you're interviewing to make sure that there aren't any fatal flaws there. Other things like experience is really, you can learn those things.
Right.
but you can't learn how to be a, you know, a person that can prospect and handle a lot of rejection, and, you know, be able to be persistent with calls and things like that, if that's what you really need them to do, you
Right. So
know.
it's interesting. So that presupposes then that leadership needs some guidance. And I'm sure this is a big part of what you do, Ken, is just making that determination. What do you need to do to accomplish the goals you need to accomplish?
Yeah. And a lot of times they haven't really sat down. So after you've helped them with their strategy, it's like, okay, what resources do we need to be able to, you know, to be able to penetrate the markets that you help them to address? And what are the, and it's really, it starts with what are the activities they need to do and with whom?
Mhm.
And then you have to really look for somebody that has the wherewithal in their personality, the drive, or the empathy, or whatever they need to have to be able to be successful in that environment, and test them for that. And but they haven't really, you know, sometimes, you know, they could be having a lot of inbound, let's say, inquiries, and what they really need is somebody who is at a lower level, just to be able to have the right questions and qualify them for a meeting with the people who have more experience. And
Mm.
that's a lower level person, and instead they may go out and hire some really, you know, high priced salesperson who has a lot of experience in the industry. That's not the right hire. Okay. Maybe that's what they need. Okay. But you really have to look at, okay, where do we really need to fill in, and where, you know, what are the characteristics of the person that we need? You know, the other thing is the territory. You know, where should that person be located? I had a coaching session today with a manufacturer, and, you know, first he had to really build up his support staff, and he's been working really hard at that and training the people so that he could follow through and continue to grow. But he's mostly selling through distributors, and there's some big gaps in the areas where he, you know, he needs to have more resources on the West Coast and the Southwest part of the country, right? So we're working on that now. Does he? He's looking at maybe hiring a person in the Southwest part of the country, but then what about California?
Mm.
And so, what's the best strategy? Should he get a new dealer? But he's got a dealer out there that's not, you know, producing. That's the problem. Okay. Or should he hire somebody out there? And we have to weigh the pros and cons. But the real gap that we're trying to fill is insufficient ability to manage that territory and all of the potential customers that are out there, as well as logistics, because he's in the southeastern part of the country. So how efficient is it to have his tech support and his salespeople getting on planes and going out there all the time? You know what I mean? So those are the kinds of things you have to think about.
Right. So it really is. I mean, there's a lot of planning that goes with that. And, you know, I've had occasion to work with some very large sales organizations as well, as an outgrowth of some of the messaging work we've done. And what's fascinating to me is even very large organizations don't, we assume they have their act together. They have sales enablement people, they have sales operations people. They should have all this thing mapped out to, you know, to a fine, like a finely sharpened knife, but not so. I don't know what it is, but I guess it's hard to do. It's hard to figure out. Now, when you do as a small company, you have a different challenge. It's not that you have too many people, you don't have enough, and you can't just pop in headcount, because it's, you know, 6 figures every head that you add. So for a smaller company, that's going to be really hard to do. So I see the value in just asking those questions. But, you know, something else that's come up, and it's obviously as a result of the pandemic in the last 2-3 years, and that is sales or access to people, the way people connect has changed, right? It seems.
Yeah.
So what have you found that to be like the biggest changes, and maybe what hasn't really changed, but maybe people think it has? So I'm just kind of curious, what has really changed, and maybe what people say have changed but hasn't.
Well, I mean, one thing that's changed is the fact that you and I are here talking on a virtual tool. The technology of video conferencing, you know, for lack of a better term, is improved dramatically. Not only that, people's willingness to communicate this way you know, the acceptance of it all,
Right.
you know, has just happened by necessity through the pandemic. Okay. And, you know, for me, at a personal level, it's opened up my market significantly, right? Because, you know, before there's so much business. I'm in Boston, right? There's so much business right here in New England. I never really had to venture outside. But now you know, I've got clients in California and southeastern part of the state, and you know, in New York. You know, it doesn't really matter where they are because I can work with them. And usually, you know, I always did, because I would have, you know, customers that have sales people that are dispersed,
Mm-hmm.
you know, even international. So we would get them all together through tools like Zoom and GoToMeeting and you know, but you know,
But
the
those always
way,
felt heavy back then. It was like I've been on video technology for for probably a decade now, but and I've always wanted to, for those exact reasons, to be more geographically diverse and serve a wider audience. But the acceptance, you put you I think you hit the nail right on the head. It was always uncomfortable. It was like a special event to be on a WebEx or to be on a GoToMeeting, and not everybody was on board. Can you fly in? Can we just have the meeting? But now people were meeting their grandchildren through Zoom and all these and Teams and
yeah,
so you know, now it's mainstream now. It's as
yeah,
in fact, I'm on more Zoom calls for sure than I am on regular cell phone calls,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm not alone in that.
Sure, and it makes us a lot more efficient. But you know what? It's still not as good as face to face, right? And you know what? The conferences and the trade shows are coming back in a big way. A
Mm.
lot of my clients are, you know, going to trade shows now, and they're pleasantly surprised by the turnouts, better than they thought. And you know, when I have like, I'm trying to get a meeting with somebody I've been talking to for a couple of months now, and he's in Connecticut, and I'm like, look, I'll come down there. I'll come down there on Friday, you know, and somebody else is in Worcester, which it's like an hour and a half from where I live,
Okay.
right? And I'm like, listen, if you want to meet on Zoom, I'm happy to do that. If you want me to come over there, I'm happy to do that. But you know, like manufacturers, you know, a lot of them, I'm sure you find this. They use independent sales agents, and these are windshield people, right?
Right.
And they were kind of fish out of water during the recession because they got no place to drive to, because when they get there, they're not going to let them in, right? And those people need to adopt the new the new way, you know, and they got to, you know, get on LinkedIn, and they've got to, you know, adopt the technology, because you know, yes, you can drive around and drop in on people, but you know, going in and seeing the same people isn't necessarily going to get you where you need to be.
And they may not be in the, forget that. I mean, one, yes, they may not let you in, although that's maybe his relaxed one, but they just may not have gone back to work at the office. They're working from home still, and a lot of people have hung on to that. So I mean, I realize
Yeah,
certain businesses you got to be at the business, but a lot of others, and a lot of the people you might want to actually reach out to, are very comfortable working in their Bermuda shorts at home. And you know, that's my one rule of I always wear pants. Okay, so just want to be sure about that. So uh but that's really interesting, and that change of behavior, I think people were waiting for it to all snap back to what it was. It's not, it's gonna, some of it's gonna, like you said, trade shows, things are, I'm
yep.
hearing those same things.
Hmm.
Clearly, people
Sure.
want to meet people. People still like the idea of breaking bread with somebody to get to know somebody. Um, but it's not going to go all the way back. It's not even going to go back most of the way back. It's going to be mostly like what we're dealing with now, plus some in person, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, it's a combination. It is, right?
So Ken, in that situation, right? So you, and this is probably a lot of people listening to this episode, or watching it on video, would be thinking, I got a team that's pretty set in their ways. Like you said, they're either manufacturers reps that I have that I really don't have too much direct control over. I'm just one of their principals, right? Or they're staff sales reps, but they've been around a long time. Again, I need seasoned people, understand the technology and so on. How do you get people to, through your coaching? I'm just curious, how do you get people to want to change?
I don't. They have to want to. I will talk. Part of coaching is very personal, right? And so their goals are their goals. Now, what I can do is I can help them take another look at that.
Mhm.
Okay, it's like where do you want to be 5 years from now? And I in sales, unfortunately, a lot of people compromise. The salespeople are never more energetic and gung ho as they were the first day they came to work, right? And they're like, hey, you know what? This guy wants me to do 1 million, but I want to do 2 million. I
Right.
want to make that kind of money. And then after a while, hey, you know what? I'm living off 1 million. It's not so bad, right? And they lose sight of that. What did that 2 million mean to them? Because when they were thinking about all the things that they could do with that, or what do you need for yourself, that should motivate you. And my job is to keep that in sight for you and to help you. Then the next thing is, what's the formula? Okay, what is your formula? A lot of times, salespeople don't really figure that out. They're just they hit the ground running, and they're not thinking, okay, what do I actually need to do and with whom to really make this happen? And or if they're catching a lot of little fish, they're never going. The ocean isn't big enough there.
Right.
The sea that they're in, they've got to maybe go up market. What is your formula to really get to where you need to go, and then keep track of your success, of what's working and what's not, which is a whole nother story, probably another podcast
Another podcast episode,
on
but
how
we
people
can we
track
can do that,
things.
Ken. I have connections. That's good.
Yeah.
No,
Uh,
that's great. Well, Ken, first of all, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. Especially really contemplating the things needed to bring about change in this category and how people have to look at it. And I love the last part, really hitting home the point that at the end of the day, you can't want it more than the salesperson wants it. And so you kind of remind them of why did you choose this profession? Why are you here? Love
yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
Ken, if somebody listening right now says, gee, I'd like to know more about Ken and what he's up to and how to get in touch with you, where should they go on the web to find you?
Yeah, well, you can go find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is Ken Cheo, or you can go to oursalescoach.com, OUR salescoach.com, and you can, set an appointment there with me to talk. Happy to have a conversation, and if I can give you some advice, that'd be great. So either way works for me.
Fantastic. Well, Ken Cheo, thank you for stopping by and really adding value to our listening audience, all about sales here at Business Growth on Purpose. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jose. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Business Growth on Purpose. If you like the show, hit subscribe and leave us a review to help other people find the podcast. And if you're ready to take the next step in driving intentional growth for your business, come check out what we're doing at valueprop.com. We've developed industry-leading programs and systems to help B2B owners take control of their growth. Until then, thanks for listening to another episode of Business Growth on Purpose.